Next will be Pastor Bruce Wall with Morning Inspiration, heard on the Boston Praise Radio and TV network.
We want to thank the Taste of Eden restaurant for sponsoring this broadcast. Taste of Eden is located at 38A Norfolk Street in Dorchester, Massachusetts. Call Hoper at 617-283-00.
Well, we are here, and we are in the studio, and Pastor Hobbs and I, when I came in this morning, I usually beat Pastor Hobbs coming into the studio, so when I came in, I put the key in the lock, and I was ready to turn off the alarm system, and it was already turned off. I walked in the door, all the doors were open, and I walked downstairs, and there's Pastor Hobbs with his bow tie on, not his hat, with his bow tie on, and he was ready. He had the studio all set up, so I want to say thank you, Pastor Hobbs, for getting up this morning and setting up the studio for our broadcast today. This has been a long-anticipated opportunity for us to sit and talk with the police commissioner, Michael Cox, and I thank him for being with us today. We had a meeting with you, Pastor Hobbs and I, Minister Priscilla. It was a great meeting in your office a number of weeks ago, and you made a commitment that you would come on Boston Black News, Boston Praise Radio and TV, and be a part of our family. So you made a statement to me just a few minutes ago about being here at Boston Praise Radio. This is your first time here, but it's also
my first time on any radio in Boston. So.
Okay, first time on any radio station in Boston. Wow, that's a privilege. And so we thank you for that. And this morning we wanted to sit and have a conversation with you, a casual conversation, and to ask you some questions about your actually being back in Boston. And so we have a number of people who were going to call in, but I'm concerned that those great telephone calls will take us away from talking with you and hearing from you. So let's just spend the time with you, Pastor Hobbs, and myself. Are you okay with that?
I'm totally okay with that.
Absolutely. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, first question I have is, can you share your history with the Boston Police Department and share some of the high points and also share some of the low points if there were any?
Sure. So I have been in the department 30 years. I've been in policing 33 years. Started back in 1989, in February 1989. At that time, Boston was experiencing some of the highest crime rates in its history. Actually, those next 3 years would probably peak the highest crime rate in the city. And so I started off. I think spent a day at B2, permanent assignment at B3, and I worked primarily in Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan for the first 5 years or so, because after I left B3, I went to the anti-gang violence unit, which was a brand new unit at that time when we were in the over 100 plus homicides. Very, very tough period of time in that period. And that's where I primarily worked, certainly in the black community. And me and my partner at the time weren't worried about the drug aspect of crime back then, but it was really about gun-driven crime activity, the murders and things of that nature. And I was very active and was involved with some of the more high-profile events in the city, as far as homicides and things of that nature, and being able to solve them, or at least have an impact on removing people from the city that were driving the crime. And so then we get to, probably the more recorded history of my alleged life story here, where in around 1995, coming off of a tour of duty at the end, it was around 2 o'clock, because we used to get off at 1 o'clock, and when I was in the anti-gang violence unit, I was mistaken for a homicide suspect that I was actually chasing.
Now, were you undercover?
I was in plain clothes.
In plain clothes,
yes,
okay.
Back at the time,
Right.
which was plain clothes. And so, allegedly, I guess I was mistaken for that person, and, clearly, there was abuse, unconstitutional policing, as I like to refer to it, and things of that nature. And, of course, what had happened was, I guess people would come to find out that I wasn't that person, and then they kind of abandoned me and left, and then there was a series of no one knew anything for a long period of time. So I was out injured for a little while, came back. Actually, prior to that, I had taken a promotional exam and did well on the promotional exam.
Okay.
And I was up to be promoted anyway prior to that. So while I was out injured, they actually promoted me while I was still out. And I was assigned to internal affairs, which people don't understand. I had interviewed for that job before I was ever.
Anyway, so they didn't just put you in there because
That's
of
right.
your experience.
People had no clue that both I had taken an exam and actually they interviewed for that job long before that injury happened in general, because I had scored well on the exam overall. So so they assigned me to the same places that I would have probably gone had that not happened, but people probably perceived it differently. So so then during this period of time, which is probably well documented, there was certainly some harassment. There were probably folks at the time that thought that I was disloyal in some way to the police department, and there was a lot of push and pull. I was far younger than I am today, and although my resilience has been always fairly strong, my willingness to talk about things outside of my family was not there, and I don't know how much it is there today, but I do know that I've certainly learned from it. And one of the things that I've learned is that speaking about it, well, not really about the incident itself, but what we learned from it, to keep those mistakes happening over again is important. It's important to the world, regardless of how I may or may not feel about this stuff personally. So, but back then I didn't. So. I was always a fairly determined person in general, and regardless of what people know or not, I very much had planned to do something about this in my own way, and we did, and it was via a lawsuit after multiple criminal investigations where no one found out about anything. I think the district attorney did one, the U.S. attorney did one. Of course, internally there was an investigation, and it was not a lot found out in general. Then I sued civilly and I won. And then after that, it was about, what am I going to do in this career now where I've sued at my department.
Right. I was going to ask you, after suing the department, did things quiet down for you, or were they still the same? Was it perceived as betrayal? Sometimes people just talk about police. I think almost in any organization, sometimes when people challenge the organization which has worked, I think a lot of people, just due to self-preservation, realize that, hey, I work here. Maybe I need to stay on this side and ride this out, because I don't want my job or being put at risk in some way, shape, or form. And I think a lot of people were just quiet in a lot of ways. I said at the time, I had a lot of quiet support where people would see me one-on-one outside of the job or whatever and come over and speak. But it wasn't, I didn't have that kind of support walking through the halls in general. And, but to be quite honest, I don't know if I even expected it. So, but it was a tough period of time because there was a lot going on. There was a lot of investigations. There was a lot of mad people. It impacted a lot of people in the police department. Beside myself, there were some people who were ultimately fired. And as a result of all of that ending, which is it's pretty well documented, as I said before, I just really had a choice of, am I going to stay here or am I going to leave? And for me, probably due to some of the harassment I've received, I was an active police officer, so I was not afraid of much, as far as bullying and things of that nature, even though when it's personal, it's totally different. And I know how much good that I, tried to provide or do at the time when I came on. I know, particularly working in the black community most of the time, all the people that were helping, all the people that were so happy to see us and work with us in so many ways. And I said, why in the world would I want to stop doing something that, outside of that incident, I loved the job. It was a good job.
And working with all kind of folks that were dedicated to trying to do something about crime in the cities. And you recall it was really, really outrageously bad here, and wanting to make a difference. And I was just saying, why in the world would I want to be driven out by some folks? And I realized, all that quiet support. There were a lot of people here that care or whatever, but culturally it wasn't a thing to stand up in that way or to actively push back against that part of the culture. So I said, well, if I'm going to be here, I need to educate myself a little bit more about how did this come to be? How do these conditions happen? How can so many good people be in the same organization and allow this stuff and not support somebody who's a victim more so than anything else? And so that's what I did. But I didn't talk about it.
Sometimes you might sue an institution that you're a part of or push back, not because you're angry, not because you want to hurt people, not because you want to expose what's going on necessarily, but you push back because you want to make the place where you work a better place for other people as well as yourself. And people don't see that when you're doing it because now everyone's running for cover. But hearing you talk about this for the second time, it sounds to me like you wanted to make the Boston Police Department better because you saw an error. And contrary to what other people may have thought, that was your motive for moving into this.
Thank you for making that more succinct for me. There's no doubt about that. That's exactly right. Yeah, it was a job I loved, and certainly there's a lot of individuals on the job that care for the people that we work for, the public in general, and they were there. And at the same time, there's criticism, and I was part of the criticism.
Sure.
I also realized how much good there was in what we were trying to do. And so, that was certainly, a very, very important reason to stay, is that, we need to work to make this job better. We need to work to change the culture. We need to work to make sure people who do the job understand, why we're here. So this kind of thing can't happen again.
It can't happen again.
Right.
So after all of that, your career took you out of the city. And so tell people where you were, what police department you were a part of prior to coming back to Boston, and why did you leave that experience to come back to this city?
Yeah, so back in 2018, Willie Gross was gracious enough to appoint me as superintendent of Police Academy, professional development at the time, and that was a great job here. There's no doubt about that. For me personally, from the time that I talked about that incident to that point in time, I had gone back to school multiple times.
Okay.
I had, finished my undergrad, gotten a master's in criminal justice, had gotten an MBA. I had done quite a few certificates. I had done quite a bit educating myself around how do you make a department better and things of that nature. And we had the first black commissioner in the city at the time, and who I knew was a friend of mine. I thought we were in good shape as a city and whatever, and I'll be honest, I didn't think I had any more neither to prove nor to, learn actually being here. And I was near the end of my career, what I thought. So I, at the time, retired from here and applied for actually a couple of jobs. One was in New York, which I was a finalist for, and in Ann Arbor, Michigan, when my son went to school at the University of Michigan. He played football for them there as well. So I was familiar with the area. I'm certainly familiar with the environment. It's a lovely city. There's no doubt about that. It's a very, very nice city. And, the police department has resources. It was a lot going on. And I said, if I'm going to go have a fingerprint on changing policing, when I go to a department where I think I can actually go there and make some change and bring community policing, because they weren't really practicing it, and do that before I totally hang up my walk in this law enforcement world. And so that's what I did, and I went out there, and it was a nice city and things of that nature. What I learned quickly is when you run an organization, change is not that easy, right? Individuals can't do it by themselves. You need partnership from politically, from your mayor, you need it from city council, you need it from your command staff, you need it from the officers who work there, you need it from the community. You need a lot of partnerships to make real change.
Okay.
And so, I learned that pretty quickly. And I'm not from the Midwest, so I was outsider. And that makes it a little bit more difficult too. clearly we went through the same thing as everyone else with the protests, Floyd protest, all the Black Lives Matter movement and things of that nature. And so, dealing with that and COVID. So I dealt with all those things at the same time as, here in Boston in that way. So policing started to change a lot. And, for me, what I saw was the potential of things getting worse rapidly. Not due to the protests, but due to the reactions to the protests, where what it seemed like is common sense left public safety. People wanted to see. They had basically given up on police departments.
Right, the whole defund the police movement.
Correct. They given up on it and say, you know what, we can't fix it, so we might as well just break it and start something new. That's what it seemed like to me. And, having, certainly lived through a time when you can see things get far worse before they get better, just listening to some of the things that were put forward, I was just like, that won't, not only will it not fix the police, it'll make law enforcement worse, which will mean, particularly the people of color, are always going to, feel the worst part of that. And so, at that time, I tried to bring some common sense and educating about ideas and goals and things of that nature. Do we need to change in a lot of ways? Yeah, we do. Do we need to try to reinvent some things? Sure. But we're a job made of humans and people who are, let's say that we're human, they're not perfect. If there's something that changed another industry, made medicine better, made legal world better, made banking better, because they're all dealing with people as well, that will highly likely work for us too. But if you're making up something special for us and say, hey, if we put a dunce cap on them, put them all in the corner, don't talk to them, and that'll show them. Well, that's not going to make us better. It didn't make students better in school. It's not going to make us better as people in a community and partnership. And so it kind of, the times got rough, and in a lot of ways, I was like, wow, I got more reinvested in policing and really studying and trying to see what works and didn't work throughout the country and things of that nature. So I was in a community that was fairly affluent, didn't have anywhere near the issues of here. And then the opening came up, and actually some people had reached out, asked me, was I going to participate? And to be honest with you, after moving and selling a home and going someplace else, that was a bit of a struggle. But just on the decision on whether to come back, because I was here a long period of time, and I don't think I was ever called on a radio show or a TV show to ask me, hey, are you going to participate in being the police commissioner before? So I didn't really think that, to be honest, I didn't think that I was wanted or valued in that way, because I was here for such a long period of time, and I don't recall many folks, regardless of what I was doing within the department, mentioning my name.
Sure. Being in the other police department and considering coming back to Boston, it's like coming back to what you just left in steroids.
That's right.
And when you were talking about the 80s and 90s, I was very active back then with Georgette Watson and Drop a Dime. I was a clerk magistrate for 24 years under Jack Bulger. So I've experienced a lot of this. And Joe Carter was the police officer that was assigned to work with us, the protection details, anything we needed. Joe Carter was the one. And so you and I didn't interface much back then.
No, we did, but we did a little later on, because I worked with Paul Joyce way back. I was a deputy superintendent on him when I first, and I certainly know who you were, because all of the jobs you just made reference to, and so, but not personally.
Well, I'm privileged today to have Pastor Hobbs is actually the engineer. He's running we're on 39 different networks, and he's making sure we stay on them all. But I decided at the last minute to include him, because he was at the meeting with you, myself, and Minister Priscilla, and he has a couple questions he's going to ask you. I have to apologize to him, because he's actually not going to be seen on the screen, because we only created 2 screens.
Oh, good.
But we got your voice, and so let's go ahead.
Certain Commissioner, do you have a working relationship with the Massachusetts Association of Minority Law Enforcement Officers, and what is their value to the Boston Police Department?
So I certainly belonged to them for over 30 years, the entire time I was on the police department, and then I left, and I'm back, and I certainly know some members in the agency, and I believe I have a working relationship. I don't think we've had a meeting recently, but we certainly met when I first came on. They're absolutely valuable. I mean, when I was a young officer, and when I first started, and throughout the entire time I was there, I thought I was an active participant because you needed it in a sense that when we first came on, there wasn't a lot of people of color.
Mm-hmm.
You had no say-so. You really didn't have any mentors. You didn't have any key allies in command staff in a lot of ways because it just wasn't a diverse department. And so they were the only people that could potentially speak not only for you, but for the values you were trying to bring forward, or the value you even brought to the police department in a lot of ways that maybe wasn't appreciated by other folks, even if it wasn't due to something racial, or it might be due to just the bias of liking and knowing the people that they're familiar with, grew up with, and we weren't those people. So it was a tremendous organization in so many ways, and probably gave me, or not probably, did probably provide the opportunities that I ultimately had, whether it's through promotions or anything else later in my career.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The shootings and murders and the violence, this spike that we've been experiencing here in Boston, have many people on edge and scared. Are these shootings gang-related, retaliation, or what?
Yeah, so, until we actually, capture some of the people involved, I don't want to speak too much on what individual things are going on, but there's certainly, a rise in violence in younger and younger people.
Mm-hmm.
That is something, a trend that we can talk about a little bit more. The incidents, as opposed to, we were talking about a different time, when there was a lot more random violence. When you're talking about Tiffany Moore, people have been, shot on
a mailbox.
On a mailbox.
Yeah.
When you're talking about, people being randomly robbed, whether it's, they didn't have cell phones back then, but necklaces, it was not a safe place because it was a lot of randomness to it. I mean, if you were trying to go from point A to point B in certain areas and places, you could be victimized. In fact, I don't believe we're living in anywhere near that kind of era today. And some of the things that may or may not be going on might be related to beefs and social media and things of that nature that, where people are acting out of, some connection in some way that doesn't bring this randomness. That being said, that when that happens in a public forum, anything can happen, right? Bullets don't have eyes and things of that nature. So, yes, that does present a problem. And I've talked about this a little bit more about statistically speaking. Right now, year to date, we are on course to have a better crime rate than we did last year.
Mm-hmm.
B2, towards like violent crime around homicide is better than last year. B3 is better than last year. I'm talking about the areas here.
Mm-hmm.
C11 is not. Right, one area that's where a lot of this has been occurring, and that's why we're redeploying and refocusing some things to make sure that we address that. But for the most part, every other part of the city is.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have these horrific things in a very short period of time, and social media, which back in the 80s didn't exist like this.
It brings a whole new dynamic, because you've mentioned it twice, and I didn't mention that at all in any of my research and trying to get ready for today. Social media is a major component to what's happening, because you can get people, you can attack them through social media that the police may not know about it or understand the code language, and so things could start from there rather than at a party or somebody rashing you at school. So that's a major dynamic.
Yeah, I think it used to joke or hear some people say, Facebook gangsters, where they get
Facebook
on there and
gangsters.
and that's not a thing. I just made that up. But where people get on, and the reality is that's real time, and sometimes people might put out there, meet me at XYZ, or I'm standing right here, and outside of us, surveilling every single person every day, which, by the way, we wouldn't do. Secondly, we don't have the means to do it. To do something like that, how do you intervene? I mean, outside of someone telling us,
right,
the community,
right,
hey, we're out here. We just heard this.
Right.
You should know. I think I've gotten some pushback, as at least someone has said about, victim blaming, like blaming the community for the violence in the community. I'm not never going to blame the community for the violence in the community. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that, part of our job is to, reduce crime and fear of crime in general, help prevent it. But we can't. Police have never been really able to do that without the community's input and involvement. And we're part of the community around that. And so that's what I mean. But when they know about stuff, and you mentioned social media, something's about to happen, and they don't let us know, and people just sit there and, and tweet back and forth, watch what happens, and this and that. And when they can have an opportunity to contact us, well, that's the part that maybe needs to change. Or if people see something, feeling like it's okay or safe to talk to us in some way, so we can help bring that perpetrator to justice, to help prevent that stuff from happening again. A lot of the times when you're talking about violence in cities, they're not driven by everybody. It's usually a small percentage of folks that do it over and over and over again. Right? And that's the issue, is like, let's remove those people who don't respect the community, that don't respect life, and to make it a safer place. We've learned a lot about criminal justice system, and trying to throw these big nets out there and throwing large parts of our community in jail. We're not going to do that anymore. That's not a thing, particularly around minor drug offenses and things of that nature. But
that's what, sorry for interrupting, that's when the police or whomever, the PR people, feel we've got to do something. And so let's go arrest all of these folk who have outstanding warrants, whatever. Let's arrest them, get a big splash in the newspaper, and it looks like you're really doing something. But that is hurting. It might be good PR, but it's not solving the problem.
It's not solving the problem, but there's so much we can do to try to do that. And one of the things we've learned is the police can't solve it alone. Right. And I'd certainly say, Mayor Wu and the administration are doing a ton of providing wraparound services in the city that didn't exist back then. Trauma teams didn't exist. Think about a long time ago, I remember multiple shootings right in front of the police station, both B2 and B3. Right in front. I mean, not just on one occasion or in churches or, out in front of places. It traumatized the community, but there were no resources, trauma teams to come in to help families do that stuff. Or if you needed to move from where you lived to some other place because of a gang activity or whatever, there was no one really there to provide support to help you do that. Well, it exists today in so many different ways. And so, we're fortunate in that way.
Well, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, years ago, there was a pastor who was killed as a result of police breaking into the wrong home. And Pastor Williams, I think, I can't remember, pull the name, but I remember talking to Mayor Menino, and we actually had a community meeting here in the church. So the mayor came, the police commissioner came, and I stood up and explained why they were there, and then gave the community a chance to vent. And it was, we didn't have the trauma teams, so that trauma was going to be experienced right in that meeting.
That's right.
But Mayor Menino sat there and took it all. The police commissioner sat there and took it all. And it wasn't a meeting where I promised them that, come on, this is a good PR thing for you. No, it was going to be rough. But, we kept doing that, and the community began to trust what we were doing. Why? Because some of the faces, some of us in the community were trusted, and we were challenging the mayor and the police commissioner. You can't set up these meetings. They got to be real. They got to be raw. Are you willing to come in? And it helped us to be able to bring some hope back to the community. Are you willing to do something like that? We're an unscripted meeting with the community and help them to feel like you're really there to protect them.
So to be quite honest, I thought I was.
Okay.
Prior to that, I've had many meetings from, Faith in Blue when I first started, all these events that we've been having. It's just been very recently where all of a sudden there's rhetoric about a disconnect.
Yeah.
Right. There's some folks that, maybe ministers that I don't know at all. And maybe that's their cry to get to know me, but the reality is that we're always out there talking to communities. We're talking to all kind of folks, people who are in the life, the wrong life, to make sure that they, to get their input on, what can we do to help stop some of this stuff that's out there, to regular folks in general. So, we're always willing to do that. I think it's important. When I say about education, we don't have a lot of time sometimes, right? And if it's truly organic, like community related, where folks just need answers, whatever, I'm absolutely always for that. But if it's drama created, right, when people are coached up, right, with misinformation and things like that, that's difficult to do. And not that I'm afraid. I'm not afraid of anything, other than God, right? But the reality is that I don't want to create an atmosphere where people are misinformed, right? Because that's all I'm going to do is that we tell the facts as we know them. We'll listen to people because people are angry and they have a right to be angry if they feel as though their community is not safe. But we try to give them the reality of what's going on and what is actually going on in that way, and how they can help, and hopefully at the end they feel better. Or actually give them resources around trauma and things of that nature, which you made mention before, that the mayor's been so good about having all these teams to come in and address some other issues.
And I think, before we go to my other question, I think sometimes the anger comes out of, as you just said, I need help. I need some support. I don't know what to do. I remember when we, Georgette Watson and myself and others, moved into the Lenox Street housing projects many years ago. We were going to stay there for 7 days and work with the residents and teach them how to fight back. When we moved out, a husband came to us and said, "I want to thank you for coming down and spending the week here." And I said, "Hey, we needed to do this. We needed to connect the community with the police." He says, "What you don't understand, my wife was going to commit suicide because she thought that she was going to be attacked by some of the major drug dealers in the area. And the week that you folk were here created such a reprieve that she didn't feel that anymore. She came and talked with me, and I got to help." When you have those public meetings where you step into the pain of where people are at, it's not really your job per se, because you're not a therapist, but people are going to see you as a symbol of hope in the police department. And we've got to figure out how to work with you, all of us, to give you that platform where you and the mayor and others who have the resources can provide for the needs of our people any way that they need them. Yeah?
I appreciate that. You'll hear me talk about this all the time, partnership with our folks in the community to help people feel safe and to make our community stronger, and that's how it works. So we work together around some of this stuff. Yes.
Okay, good. Pastor Hobbs, I think you're up with the makeup of the department.
Yes. So what is the racial makeup of the Boston Police Department?
Well, certainly it's changing daily, and when I say daily, certainly our new recruits are quite diverse, but come January, we could have a whole host of folks that have moved on and retired as well. So we are probably not as diverse as we've been before in the past, and without holding me strictly to those stats, because I don't have them with me, we are still a majority white police department. There's no doubt about that, but we are trying to bring all our numbers up around diversity, whether it's women, certainly people of color, Asian officers, officers that speak different languages. We are working in every aspect to bring all of those numbers up so it can represent our very diverse city that we live in.
How are you doing that? How are you recruiting more black and brown and women?
Yeah, so we're doing several things, and we have actually organizations, like Jago in our department that are mentoring, people of color and certainly people of Latino descent, preparing them for a police academy, and then helping them get us, going through our academy, and virtually. And this is a stat that I think is, and I don't want to jinx it for them in any way, but they have 100% success record for the people that they've mentored before they get into academy to when they come in our police academy graduating. and that's tremendous. And that's not a Boston Police. That's that organization's,
That's an independent
that
organization.
independent, similar to Mamleo, who are identifying folks, having them come in, preparing them for what it takes to get through a police academy, right up through the academy and graduation in general, whether it's mentorship around some things. And it's a tremendous program, and it's 100% success rate. I don't care what business you're in. It is unheard of. And as far as both recruitment and helping us get people through, they are doing quite a great job at doing that. So, maybe if we can emulate that in some other places, it might be helpful. But we're going to be out there. We're trying to hire a diversity, a recruitment officer. We had one previous who left and went to the fire department, and we're going to try to repost that position in general. But we're advertising anywhere and everywhere we can. And right now, if anybody's out there, particularly in our community, that wants to be a police officer, it's a great job. And there's multiple ways you can come on early, whether it's through our cadet program or obviously through the exam itself. We have a lot of opportunities out there.
If I can, I've talked to a number of black young men and women about joining the police department. And they said, great job, man, you can retire much earlier than I can retire, and you're going to be okay, and you can still maybe find another job. And the response has historically been, no, I don't want to be a police officer.
Yeah.
No, that's number one. Number two, I feel that they feel that they're betraying their friends who might be in the life, and I'm going, how do we erase that? How do we help young people? And some of these young people want to carry guns, but how do we help young people recognize that this is a service? This is an opportunity for you to protect your community, help your community, your families. How do we change that paradigm?
So, and this is a tough question. In a lot of ways, throughout history, the police departments have certainly, policed in an unconstitutional way, and as a result, something has happened from what Rodney King to the most recent stuff.
Sure.
Then there's been protests around that, and particularly in the black community, where we have always seen the police as oppressors and not good for our community in some way. This more recent thing, because of the fact that it happened during a pandemic, which we've never experienced before for the most part, and the national attention that it got when there was nothing else on TV, it magnified, every negative aspect of policing to an nth degree worldwide.
Sure.
And young folks, between social media, whatever, they're impressionable. That period of time, I think, has done a tremendous, I don't want to say disservice, but it certainly has biased against people coming in law enforcement in a way that it might be a little difficult to undo without partnership from everyone, where it's a job that's both needed, but it's also a respectful job. It's a job, it's a noble job, right? We need help of actually, I hate to say it, in the community and every place else, recognizing that it's a profession that's noble, that it's a profession that's worth going into, that humans can make a mistake and do wrong things, but you can do that in every profession across the board. But for the most part, they're here to actually protect and serve the citizens in the community. We need to do a better job of elevating, that profession. It's a job where you can make an income. It's a job where you can take care of your family. It's a job where you can buy a house. It's a job that you would think in our community that we would want to give our children an opportunity to go into, to give both give back to the community, but more importantly, to be able to take care of yourself.
I don't want to interrupt you asking questions, but he's stimulating a lot of things in my head and also in my heart. I think that when our community really can hear your voice, not just around a crisis, where you've got to get out there, you've got to say things, and when there are multiple crises, I don't know how you are able to say anything fresh. You got to say almost the same thing. But if they could see you like they see Mamleo here, Mamleo's here on Saturdays, and they have now a 4-hour broadcast, and people hear them every single week, and people have people have said, I have a whole different idea and concept about the police department, hearing Larry and Dr. Bradley and others talk every week. We've got to find a way for your voice to come out of that crisis mode, where we see you on TV when there's a crisis, into a situation where we are here, and we are taking calls, and we're ready to take the calls and have people get to know you and to know your mind. Would you be open to? I know you're busy,
the answer is yes, right?
Okay.
So I'm not running for any. People, one of the things going on, and people having conversation, and they say, well, about the amount of work going on. I said, well, it's been 95 days, so I don't know what the expectation is about, how much you can do in a short period of time. Sure. And I'm trying to do a lot in a lot of different areas.
Sure.
And can we do better? Absolutely, we'll try. But it's only so many hours in a day. But I'm trying to be out there and be visible and have conversations. And absolutely, we can absolutely do that. That's part of the job.
Okay.
Right. You can't say that you're doing community policing if you're not available for people, if you don't make yourself available, and you're part of the media around some of this, right? So you have a voice for the community, and so absolutely, I'll take the time, to routinely as I can come on board to help educate and do that, particularly for diverse communities.
And just before Pastor Hobbs asks the next question, I want to say to those who are listening this morning that I'm the one that made the decision not to take any phone calls because I wanted to get to know our police commissioner. I wanted to spend time with him, and I knew calls were going to take us to the left, to the right. And so the commissioner was willing to take calls, but again, my decision, I'll own that today. Pastor Hobbs.
Sure. So one of the things is someone made the question with regard to the Law Enforcement Explorers program. Is that something that's active or something that you'd be consider bringing back?
Yeah, it's not active now, but it's certainly, I just had a conversation about that maybe we can bring that back. And so if we have an Explorer program, which is younger kids in school, and then as well as a cadet program, and then, those are feeders to possibly bringing more focus onto the police department, particularly kids, from our city, from our diverse neighborhoods in a lot of ways. So anything that can help address, the diversity of our department and actually just bringing on good people in general is something we're going to look into.
Outstanding. Commissioner, what is the strategic plan that Boston Police Department has to stop the violence and bring peace to the city?
Yeah, so strategic plans, that's another question that's been out there. And I think about, the history or whatever. I don't know how many police commissioners have ever asked what the strategy is for whatever. Our crime, and this is no offense to anyone, our crime rate for major cities is one of the best in the country, period. Period. Strategies, when there's different strategies you have. Strategy like for a public event like the marathon, where there's a lot of people coming from all kind of places. We announce what some of that is because it's going to impact you for you to come visit. So you need to know your bags are going to be searched and things of that nature. So when you come in, you know what to expect to make sure things move. When it comes to strategy around catching criminals, we don't always put stuff out there because the fact is they pay attention to it too. It makes it more difficult around that. From a public safety perspective, what people need to hear is that we hear them. We understand and see the trends. We will put out there around, if there's something the public needs to know, whether it's a bomb threat or there's a person, a rapist out there, we will say, hey, we have a rapist in our community. We are not able to capture him. Be aware of X, Y, Z, right? To make sure that the public knows about stuff. So one, they're aware and it can prevent in that way. The strategy of what we're doing in the future, we're trying to set up what we call community ComStats. When we come into a community, and this is a little different, ComStat is a meeting that we have internally to our police department, which most people don't know. We look at our stats, we look at our numbers. Basically, the premise of it is what can we do to drive down the crime, to help prevent crime better next week than it was this week. So if there's something happening in this area, what can we do to do that? And so we engage the captains and all our department members about how we're going to do that from 1 week to the next. And we have this meeting, all the time. for the sole purposes of crime prevention. Now, we don't bring the whole, we don't bring a lot of outsiders in, because the fact is, it's internal to how we're using our resources. But the reality is, when we talk about partnerships, and I go back to when I said community CompStat, is that we need to grow it in a different way, where we need to engage the community in that, where we have a meeting and bring them in and explain in a neighborhood or whatever what's going on in your neighborhood. Educate them. What's going on in your neighborhood, what we're trying to do about it, and then get input from that community on, is this appropriate for what you're looking for? Sometimes policing is a history of going into neighborhoods and saying, we know what you need, right? We'll fix the problem. And then now we're engaging, you know, maybe young people or some portion of that community in a way in which they're saying, hey, you guys are over-policing me, right? But when you engage the community, like, oh no, we want, you know, I live on a street and they're speeding up and down the street and we have a lot of little kids, right? They're impacting us, right? And we're looking at the crime stats and say, wow, it looks like they might be, I see a lot of home break-ins, but yeah, I don't see anything about speeders, but their community's telling us they care about speeders. Right. So you know what? We need to listen and maybe emphasize our resources about what they want to feel safe, right? Right? That's engaging them. We also need to provide that opportunity for the ways to educate them on what's going on, cybercrime. You know, we have a lot of information. We need to do a better job of sharing that with the community to show that we have value, right? And so we can empower them to not with education about what's going on and how they can stay safe, because that will also alleviate some fear when people have that, as opposed to what happens is when someone just is like, oh, the sky is falling, the world is whatever, and there's nothing attached to it. I've used stats a couple of times. Why? Because that is factual, right? It's not sensational, and the reality is, it's really good to inform folks that, you know, sometimes bad things happen in this world that we can't control. A car just went through the Apple store the other day. I don't know.
Yeah, crazy.
I don't know how you predict that. There's some things that stores can do to put pylons or whatever to kind of help protect that in advance. But the fact is, how does police prevent that? That you can't really always prevent some of this stuff. You can react to it. But in educating the public on some of the pitfalls that are out there, the trends, the scams, the things of that nature, maybe they won't fall prey to any of that stuff. And they realize that we provide value and we educate them up, as well as build ties and trust with the community by having these meetings more and more routinely around this stuff. Eventually, you'll have a very educated population of people that won't be scared and nervous when it's maybe not called for, or will be highly educated always. So the fact is, we'll hold the police department accountable. Well, wait a minute. Statistically, X is happening here. All I know is my neighborhood is going up in this, and I don't see, you know, more patrols. What's your plan around XYZ? You haven't talked to us about any of that stuff. It's a lot easier to hold us accountable when you understand what we do and how we do it. And so we need to do more to educate the public in all parts of our city on what we're doing, so we can have a stronger and safer community and actually partner with other folks. And it's not always about the police. You know, like whether it's trauma teams or lighting or anything that can help go to public safety in general in a community, they need to have a seat at the table too.
You're not going to believe this. This is you've done just about an hour.
Oh,
you've done just about an hour. We have about 3 minutes left, and I just want to ask you one other question. We can sort of end with this, and closing comments. Do you know about the flaggers' jobs?
I know that there was a city council meeting about that,
okay,
and that's through council because it didn't go through me in that way. So, what's your question?
The last question is about the flaggers' jobs. Why are they preserved for the police, and couldn't those jobs be for neighborhood residents?
I would imagine
if you know.
Well, yeah, and I don't know in that sense. I will say this, that I think traditionally, you know, police have were you know, got those through certainly some legal means around public safety and the public safety they provided. And I think over the years, it's always stayed that way because I don't, and I'm not a lawyer around this, so please, you know, forgive me if I say something that may not be correct around this. But I believe there's like prevailing wage, you know, attachment to it. So if someone does a job, if you're doing a job, and you now bring in somebody else to do your job or share the work with you. Whoever comes in has to be paid the exact same thing.
I see.
And so, the combination of, if you have to pay the exact same wage, do you want a police officer who can actually, provide public service, make people, feel safer, prevent crime just by being there, or another civilian flagger that's not associated with policing in that way? And so I think that's what some of the rhetoric has been in the past. I don't know enough about it to comment on it. I do know, there seems to be, more need for jobs in general across the board in the city and the state, and I'm all for anything that keeps everybody working.
Okay. Take the last 2 minutes and say anything you want to say to those who are watching and listening.
Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity, and we truly appreciate it. We are in the midst of trying to transition and change a little bit, coming off of COVID. It's been a tough road in a lot of ways, and so come springtime, as the weather breaks, hopefully you're going to see a much more visible police department and out and about in neighborhoods, maybe like they were, as we get more people through our academy, because we're down quite a few officers in general. As we start to get those numbers back up, I think the visibility of your police department is going to change a little bit more for the better for the public. In between then, we're here for you. We want to partner with anyone and everyone who wants to make our city better around that stuff. And so if you're willing to partner and you're willing to, have conversations about how we can do that, the door is always open. I must admit, there's so much going on right now. Any challenges other than that, where it seems like, I might not have the time right now to get to that. But at some point, we always have to speak to our detractors, because that's important too. But right now, I have so many challenges out there that I'm focused for people like yourself who's willing to partner and certainly have a voice for the community.
Well, our doors are open. Our microphones will stay on. If you have something that you want to say to the community, you want to utilize us, we're here. We'll even come to you, film it, bring it back here, and air it, because we want the community to get to know you. And it might be better to do it this way than to go to every meeting all over the city. So we appreciate the commitment. We appreciate your team that made this happen today. And we'll look forward to doing this once again.
Well, thank you very much. And I appreciate both of you, too, for allowing me to come on here today.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.